Jesus, all the way. I'll forever trust in you. Jesus, all the way.
JC 24/7.
Among those engaged in wanton pleasure, far more people put a high price on the benefits and thrills to be derived from pleasures when they come, but only few regard highly and consider the value of the consequences when these pleasures leave. It's nothing short of distressing to wake up to the reality that being positive is bad news. How do you live with being positive? Today we have invited two distinguished individuals who will help us treat with the whole matter of HIV, which is one of the consequences to be derived from pleasure. Mr. Oscar Ocho and Mrs. Kay Gary, thank you for joining us in the session.
Our pleasure.
And to put things in perspective, let's deal with the current statistics as they relate to perhaps the Caribbean and more specifically Trinidad and Tobago. Are we still in a state of bad news?
Well, anytime you are having a disease that is not curable, that's bad news. But we have reached a time when it seems that we have a fall in the number of new cases that we are having.
Okay.
So can we say we are stabilized? I'm not so sure, but it's not as bad as before.
How bad was it before?
Oscar, what do you want to share on this?
In reality, when we look at the Caribbean figures, based on what is available, and the latest figures I got from the HIV/AIDS unit at the Ministry of Health, there's an estimated 200,000 persons living with HIV/AIDS in the Caribbean.
In the Caribbean, okay.
In the Caribbean, and of that, 16,000 are children who are between the ages of 0 to 14.
Wow.
When it comes to Trinidad and Tobago, based on our cumulative total, as of December 2011, there are 23,906 persons who are living with HIV. To me, it is 23,906 cases too many.
Right.
And therefore, we need to start asking not only the young, but those who are middle-aged and those who are elderly to start looking at their behavior.
And those are reported cases.
These are reported
So
cases.
there's a chance that the figures could go up.
Go up
Exactly.
because they may not have been reported. They may not have been tested.
Okay. Why are people fearing this whole matter of testing, if that's a fact, if that's a case? Why are they fearing to be tested?
I mean, fear of diagnosis with any illness is a challenge for individuals. But when we speak about an illness that is associated with sexual behavior, with the potential for being discriminated against, where my lifestyle will be brought forward into open glare, when people would now associate my diagnosis with a particular behavior, whether it's true or not, creates that fear of not wanting to present myself to find out if something is wrong in the first place.
Okay.
And then I would have to change, perhaps, what I have been doing. So therefore, better not to know. Where ignorance is bliss, you see.
It's folly to be wise.
Is society becoming more callous or indifferent to this whole matter of the spread of HIV? Or are we cool with it? Because you are saying the figures seem to suggest that there is a reduction, but we are still in some deep waters. Are we becoming more indifferent as a society, do you think?
I don't think the word would be callous.
Okay.
But indifferent, perhaps. Because right now, I mean, we have medication so that people who are tested positive can get on medication if they need it. So therefore, the sentence of an immediate death sentence is not there. So therefore, people are, as you know, typical Trinidadians, we are going along. Well, I'm positive, but well, it's all right. I'll get help.
Okay. But didn't the fear include not just the fact that it was a death sentence, but the fact of the disease itself? living with the disease, whether I die or not. Didn't that bring on some measure of fear as well?
And I'm glad that Kay raised the whole issue of indifference.
Right.
Because, for example, when we first started off speaking about AIDS and HIV, there were banners or billboards and pamphlets. AIDS kills. So the message was that AIDS kills. When I first started working in HIV in 1990, what happened was that, in fact, 1989, most people were dying from the complications. I mean, you had young people, 21, 23, 29, dying with strokes associated with the virus.
Right.
People were wasted. They had blotches and blemishes on their skin. So people actually saw death.
Okay.
That's it.
Now with the availability of treatment, even for pregnant women, AIDS is no longer seen as a killer because people are now living with rather than dying from.
Okay.
And so it has even been reclassified by the World Health Organization and the United Nations as a chronic disease, as any other disease.
From a scientific perspective, does AIDS really kill?
No. And I'm glad that you raised that question. People die as a result of the complications associated with HIV because it's the virus that causes the infection which affects the body's systems. And when the body's systems have become so affected and the immune system have become so weakened, then the person is exposed to what we call things like opportunistic infections, which will not affect an individual whose normal immune system is functioning well. So therefore it is the complications associated with the infection that causes that.
So the kind of medication that they get, it is to help them to treat with what?
Right. Well,
You go ahead. Yes.
Now, the medication, if we understand how HIV is transmitted, there are receptor sites of the virus and the cell, the special white blood cell in the body. And there are a number of processes that take place to allow for that infection. And what the medication does is that there are different types of medication that affect specific processes in the cycle of the infection.
Beautiful, beautiful. I read an article recently that was published in December of 2011. And it is from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ernest Pate. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he is the Pan American Health Organizational Coordinator. And he had this to say, and I quote, "To date, lifestyle-related diseases such as heart diseases, respiratory illnesses, cancer, diabetes, and risk factors such as obesity and high blood pressure are the leading causes of death in the Caribbean and account for 60 to 70% of deaths globally." I found it very interesting because there's nothing mentioned of HIV/AIDS in this. Yet people's reaction to HIV seems to be filled with a greater sense of trepidation than to, well, cancer was one of those diseases, but now we are dealing with that differently. Diabetes, obesity. Why is AIDS or HIV bringing on that type of trepidation or fear, or has a different type of reaction?
I think again it's from the genesis of the disease. And so people are fearful. Remember, this is something like a social disease. If I'm diabetic, people will be sorry for me. But if I have a disease that people link with my behavior, it's a little different. So that I'm exposing myself as being, as some people think it was, just my promiscuity. So therefore, if I was so bad, then whatever happened to you, you look for it.
Okay, I hear you.
With diabetes or high blood pressure, while yes, those are lifestyle diseases, then you won't blame that much for it. So, but HIV came into a different domain. So that, yes, HIV kills, but the others, people are more empathetic to people. with those particular diseases.
Do we therefore need more education? Or
Well,
are people resisting education or just oblivious to what's happening? What is this?
Well, listen, even with the other diseases, they are educated and they still sometimes do not do what is right when it comes to it. So the diabetics, you tell them control their diet. You tell them to exercise, but they don't always do that. They just want their medication. So that education is always necessary. And we need to continue to educate people. But with education must come change, and that behavior change. And that's where I think we have the most problems in all across the board, to have behavior change in sync with the education.
And I'm glad you raised that, Kay, because I believe people do not necessarily need more information.
No.
Because that's cognition. What we want is the effective, where people begin to see, could this affect me? Could my lifestyle, could my behavior, contribute to something that I don't want? And except we move from knowledge to the affective, where we deal with people emotionally, we'll be in this roller coaster, I'm afraid.
Okay. When we come back, we look further on the whole issue of the stigmatization and whether society has become more open to individuals living with HIV. We are talking to the whole question of HIV/AIDS. We will be right back.
JC 24/7.
Listen, in life, you make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, and you move on. That's all.
Well, I ain't so sure you learning from your mistakes, you know.
You ain't so sure what happened. Is my psychic now?
Well, ain't you and Miles still fooling around?
Sex, mommy. And what can I say? It's my life. What's the big deal?
Desiree, you say you want to move in with Miles and fool around as you all please. But probably you need to sit, talk with yourself, talk to God, find out if it matters to him, and let him tell you if it's a big deal.
Whatever. That must be Miles.
Remember what I told you, eh? Talk to God and let him tell you if it's a big deal.
All right, now, Pastor. Whatever. Hi.
What happened? You're ready? The function started just now.
We can't go again.
What?
Darlene has to pick up her aunt at the airport, so we don't have anybody to babysit
You
Justin
serious?
tonight.
So why didn't you call?
She only just called a minute ago to say she couldn't come, you know.
Yeah, but you could have still called.
And tell you what, Miles, you'd have gotten a babysitter for Justin at this last minute?
No.
I don't think so.
I'd have stayed home.
Stayed home? And what about me?
You could stay home too. I ain't seen any big matter in that.
Since when you like staying home?
So a man can't stay home now?
I ain't say no, but not the Miles I know. What you up to?
Well, a woman so. You're going out too much, it's a problem. You're staying at home, it's still a problem.
Alright, fine. You wanna stay home? Why don't you stay home with me? Or perhaps you could go to your home?
So a man can't stay home alone?
Home alone? Like you watching too much movies or what, please? How about I give you one of my sweet kisses and you reconsider?
Everything is a joke for you, huh?
Okay. Refusing my kiss, alright. Something has to be wrong here. What happened? You're not feeling too well? Is it that?
You could say that.
You could say that. This sounding serious, then am I supposed to sit down now or something?
It's your house. You can do what you want.
Okay, I'll sit here then.
Desiree, let me ask you something. You still want to move in with me?
Wait, that's what this whole thing... You had me so worried. You would believe Mommy and I were just talking about that.
What did she say?
Well, you know, Mommy, she not too crazy about the idea. But as I told her, I'm a big girl
Listen,
now and I can make whatever
Desiree,
decisions.
I think you need to listen to your mother.
You think I need
As
to
a matter
listen?
of fact, I think you should have listened to your mother a long time ago.
I should have what? What that's supposed to mean?
Desiree, I think that we should take a breather.
What? Wait. Let me see if I could somehow condense all that you're trying to tell me here today. Miles, are you breaking up with me?
Did I say that?
Well, you might as well say it because it sounds very much like that to me.
Whatever. Listen, whatever. Okay?
Oh, whatever now? What happened? I'm not good enough for you? Is it that?
Desiree,
or you found somebody else?
Desiree, you're overreacting.
I am overreacting? But you're not telling me anything, Miles. What am I supposed to think?
Listen, think the worst. You think the worst. Because whatever you think, it has to be like that. Okay, you're so perfect.
Now who's overreacting? All right, wait. Let's calm down. Miles, if you need more time for your studies, I'll gladly give you space.
Desiree, it's not that. It's not that.
It's not that, then... Is your mother. Your mother still has a problem with me because that woman never liked me.
It's not that.
It's not that, then it's you. You are the one with the problem. You still have a problem with me staying home. We spoke about that countless of times,
Desiree, you're being silly. I just think that the two of us need to take a breather, okay?
A breather? Marge, just like that? No. What is this problem? What is this you're not saying? What?
Desiree, listen to me. I am positive.
I hear this talk already. You're positive that this is for the best, right?
Desiree.
But let me tell you something. You walked in here without a hug or a kiss to me.
Desiree.
Then you start saying you want to spend time home alone. This is after not seeing me for a week,
Desiree.
a whole week. Now you want a breather? What you want?
Desiree.
To chill? I don't call that being
Desiree.
positive. That's more negative
Desiree,
than
you're not
anything
listening
else.
to me.
I'm listening to you,
Desiree, I'm telling you that I'm positive.
I heard you the first time.
HIV positive.
Forever trust in you. Jesus all the way.
JC 24/7.
Welcome back to JC 24/7. We are looking at the whole matter of HIV/AIDS, and we want to look specifically on whether or not society is becoming or has become open to the whole question of victims living with HIV.
I want to stop you right there, Pastor. Victims. We would not address persons living with HIV as victims.
Okay,
They are
tell us.
persons living with HIV.
What's the difference?
A victim is somebody who had something put on them,
Or
person.
someone who was affected by the actions of
Somebody
else.
Okay. So
Right?
I stand to be corrected.
Yes.
So it's persons living.
Persons, and when we say persons, you get a different feel.
Okay. All right.
It's an individual.
All right.
You know?
So is society becoming more accommodating or more open to persons living with HIV?
I think so. While, yes, we still continue to have pockets of stigma and discrimination, I think that we are a little more open to the fact that there are persons who are infected and affected by HIV.
Okay.
And that we do not judge people as we did before. So that, yes, the society is a little more accommodating, but I'm still hurt that there are still so many pockets of stigma and discrimination. And that perhaps comes from people who don't truly understand what is going on about this.
Let me just interject with another question here. Do you think that the people's negative reaction to individuals living with HIV, do you think it may have served as a precautionary measure against the lifestyle? For instance, because I know I may receive this type of reaction, I would now, bridle my behavior.
Not always, Not always.
Of course, we know today, even though that is a fact, the behavior continues.
Yes, the behavior continues, so that we cannot always say that because of the stigma and discrimination, people have changed. There may be some people who have, but for the most part, I think that we need a lot more being done by persons to help constrain themselves where certain things are in training.
And even as you say that, Kay, I think it's also important for us to realize that while we have come a long way, Kay said we have moved a little, but from my experience, we have moved a mighty long way from when we first started, because I remember there were many persons who were diagnosed who died without having their relatives or significant others come. I have many of our cases in San Fernando, at San Fernando General Hospital, when they died, after 3 months, they were given a pauper's burial because nobody wanted to claim that body. Because remember, it was not just the person, but they were now known as the family where the AIDS person living. So that we have moved a mighty long way. But even though we have moved a mighty long way, as Kay said, there are still pockets of discrimination. And that's why we still have, and because this is a religious program, we need to put it on the table, a number of individuals who are in churches but are on the down low with their lifestyles and their behaviors. I know it will take a whole different program, but we need to treat with that because a lot of individuals are afraid to even come forward and say, listen, I have a problem with my sexuality. I have a problem with who I am or who I think I am, which might be contributing to their risk for HIV.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think a lot of emphasis has been placed on the consequences of the lifestyle and not the lifestyle itself. You know, we applaud the lifestyle while we scorn at the consequences of having to follow that lifestyle. But let's look at it within the context of our church, because there are individuals who are living with HIV who are members of the Church of God. I'm wondering now, are there times when you encourage individuals to be open, to talk about it? And in what context do you encourage such persons?
Well, you know, there's a whole confidentiality issue. And if somebody is in a committed relationship, if they are in a marriage, you need to encourage them to share that, their status with their spouse. And so because, you know, they need to know. But, all right, somebody is maybe planning to get married. Would you promote that they should get married and not tell their partner that what their diagnosis is? So yes, you would encourage that, but you don't encourage people to share their information unless they wanted to with everybody else, because of the whole issue of stigma and discrimination, and besides which is their private information.
Very much so.
You know, so that if we are talking in context of the church, then there are certain standards that they live by, so that they could not spread the disease if they kept to themselves. If they didn't have a spouse, then they would be single and would be living a certain type of lifestyle if they lived to the standards. So that in that way, but otherwise the whole issue is an issue of confidentiality too. Your job person doesn't need to know that you are infected unless you know, you wanted to share that with them.
If I were to just add to what Kay said, disclosure should be based on trust. And while we all belong to the Church of God, not all of us are gods. No, and I say it advisedly.
Not any one of us is God.
None of us.
Well, and within the context. And therefore, people who are infected or affected need to know that they can trust us to share, because sometimes it may be as a result of their actions, but sometimes it may be as a result of the actions of others. And that's why we need to be sure that they can have catharsis, where they can lay themselves bare, and to know that you are deeply interested in them as individuals, and not just interested in what happened
and their story.
to them. Exactly.
Let me become a little more personal. Let's suppose a member of your family is dating somebody that you know is living with HIV. Do you encourage, you know the person is living with HIV, but the member of your family doesn't know, is ignorant. Do you advise that outside member, I'm using that deliberately, to clear the air with his partner or her partner, as the case might be? Or do you, take your hands off and say, that's not my business?
It depends again on what type of relationship they have.
Okay.
The thing about it is that you as the person, you are not at liberty to share that information with your family member.
Okay.
Confidentiality.
Very well.
You need to teach your relative to behave according to a certain standard.
Right.
Not implicating the other person.
Right.
But if the relationship is heading in a certain direction, you could encourage the person who is positive to share the information with the other. But you are not at liberty to do that.
Okay. So it's not your moral responsibility.
No. Your moral responsibility is to be sure of your own lifestyle.
Before we come to the last question, I learned of a term called reverse discrimination, I think.
Yes.
What could you explain that to us?
Okay. When we speak about, well, in order to understand reverse discrimination, we need to understand discrimination.
Right.
So discrimination focuses on any negative behavior or thoughts or attitudes that are directed towards me based on who I am.
Okay.
Reverse discrimination, on the other hand, is where the individual who perceives himself or herself to be discriminated against now acts or reacts and acts out based on their perception of being discriminated against, which may not be anything that has to do with reality.
And that is happening today.
And it does happen. Especially, and we do see it sometimes with persons who are living with HIV, who believe, they begin to feel so sorry for themselves, forgetting that they could live holistically.
Right.
And therefore, some of them develop like a dependency syndrome. And they feel, well, okay, you are not giving me this because I am. And it may be far from reality.
In our closing exercise, I want us to look at talking to an individual who is looking at this telecast. They have switched on by mistake, and they are hearing this thing, and it has caught their attention, and they are living with HIV, or they found out just recently. What are the steps that you would take that person through in order to treat with it or cope with it?
One thing I would tell them right off, you have not been given an immediate death sentence. There is support outside for you. There are so many support groups. You can live positively. And when we say live positively, not because you're HIV positive, but you can have a positive life where you can enjoy health and all that goes with it for a long time. Again, you must emphasize the fact that there's treatment available when they need it, and that there are support groups who can support them, who can support their relatives. And Oscar, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but they need to just hold on.
Yes, and I would say to that person who is living with HIV and who might be looking at the television this morning, just to let you know that there is hope. Just as there is help for a person living with diabetes, or a person living with hypertension, or even a person who has been recently diagnosed with cancer, there is help. Both medication, social support systems, psychological support systems. There are a number of groups that have been established to provide support. There are myriad opportunities for support because you can now live life to its fullest. Back to work, dress well, look well, eat well, travel. Nobody has to know what is happening because AIDS does not mean death. AIDS just means that you are now diagnosed with a chronic disease.
And further to that, there is hope in Jesus.
Oh, yes.
Oh, he can take any negative situation and transform it into something positive. The Bible does say that God so loved the world, which includes you, that he gave his only begotten Son. So despite what others may think about you, despite what they say about you, God died for you. There is hope in Jesus. So trust him, and you can have life, but even life more abundantly. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you again once again